My name is Scott Cooney. I started CleanTechnica to promote clean energy and other sustainable alternatives, and for 13 years we've been moving markets. If we had a nickel for every time someone told us they bought their first EV, solar, e-bike, or fill in the blank clean energy solution, we'd be a cable TV channel by now. But we don't get those nickels. So unfortunately, we could use your help to reach a few more people. If just 1% of our audience chipped in a few bucks a month, we could hire dozens of great journalists and promote all sorts of climate solutions. It's easy. Just go to cleantechnica.com/support and sign up with a credit card in seconds. Cancel anytime. But we'll be sending out some cool perks too, so I think you'll want to stick around. With your support, we'll keep leading the charge. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Friday's episode of EV Obsession. I am your co host, Joe Boris, along with my guest, CleanTech CEO, Zachary Shahan.
You got
Zachary.
co-host, but then you called me a guest.
Everybody gets moved one step down. Everyone goes one step down.
One step at a time with Joe. All right, you got a ghost co-host, and I'm your guest.
That's right.
To be here every show. Just happy to be right.
We are here, of course, to talk about pickleball. Oh no, we're here to talk about the U.S. and North American EV sales market and the EV market in general, which, if you haven't bothered to pay attention recently, is basically split in half between the Tesla Model Y and everyone else.
Oh my gosh, that's pretty much the case. Yeah. Well, let me get
into the screen share and put up the forms because it's just bananas.
Yeah. I'm a bit late doing this report, actually later than I've been in as long as I remember.
Well, now you're doing a podcast every day. That takes time.
Well, yeah, I was late before we started this, but I did finally get to it, and this is the Q2 report, which you can find other Q2 auto reports, which are actually I'll have that coming next, and I do that in a way that no one else does it because I compare it all the way back to 2019. No one does that. People do year-over-year comparisons. No one compares 2, 3, 4. I go like 5 years back.
No one compares.
Similar with the US. Well, not many people do. We're gonna get, if you did that better, we would get a strike on YouTube. But luckily you can't sing it. But I mean, well, actually, this is a great test. We'll find out if we get a copyright strike. But yeah, so some people do US electric car sales reports for the US as well, but there's a problem, and that problem is that Tesla doesn't reveal. They just report quarterly figures, and they even combine the Y and the 3 and the S and the X, and those are global figures, so you have to estimate. I used to do this myself, and in Troy Tesla, I was always very close with him, but he's been tracking the industry, tracking Tesla way more closely for a couple of years now, so I just lean on his estimates now for the Tesla numbers for the US, and also go and collect all of the other EV sales numbers. There's Volvo also have to estimate because they don't break out the electric models. They report a recharge number, a recharge like percentage, but that includes plug-in hybrid, so you use that to figure. Anyway, long story short, I think this is the only such report you'll find on the US EV sales market because of how few people cover it, and because I compare it all the way back to 2020. So I'm looking at year-over-year comparisons for the quarter. So let's jump into it. So the first highlight is that the US electric car sales are up 147% in Q2 2023 versus Q2 2021. They're up 57% according to compared to last year's Q2. And if you look more at just how volume and percentage change is going, you can see that we're up 100,000 units in the second quarter compared to the second quarter of last year, and up 163,000 units compared to 2 years ago. So we're seeing strong growth in the US, which is impressive because China and Europe are seeing strong growth, but they have strong incentives. They have requirements that automakers sell more EVs. So the US doesn't have any such mandates. California has a bit, but it's really more.
Those don't take into effect until 2035. So we still have 12 years on that.
Yeah, it's very market driven, very based on, I mean, there are subsidies, but it's not mandated. So it
Right.
just shows how healthy the EV sales growth is, even in the US, even in markets like this. If you look at percentage change, as I said, that's 57% up year over year, 147% up compared to 2 years ago. Also, just to be clear, this is only full electrics, battery electric vehicles. This does not include plug-in hybrids.
Yeah, these numbers are just absolutely fantastic. And it's funny because you hear two different narratives. I do a dealer show on Mondays called the Auto Hub Show with Ian and Jeff. Love those guys. And we have a ton of car dealers that show up on that show that are, group leaders, that are district managers, things like that. And the conversation that they're having and the feeling that they're getting is that EV sales are slowing down. And they're getting that. Well, but it makes sense because in their head, a year ago, 18 months ago, they couldn't keep EV inventory at all. They couldn't get it. It was all pre-sold. You would go in, you would pay whatever you paid, and then in 3 to 6 months, maybe you'd get your vehicle. And now they have vehicles on the lot that have been there for 15, 20, 30 days. And they're sitting there going, well, this is slowing down. But that's not the case at all. This is a case of inventory is starting to keep up with demand, but there are still places in the market you can't get an Ioniq, you can't get a Rivian, you can't get a Lightning work truck. There's plenty more to unpack there, where the Lightning work trucks are still 2 years out. The e-transit vans are still sold out for 2 years. But if you want to get a $120,000 Ford F-150 King Ranch Lariat with hand dyed leather and all kinds of weird wood, yeah, exactly. If you want that, you can go find it on a lot. But yeah, that is not
that's a great point. And it's funny because I used to be in some of these broader auto expert discussions like before Tesla really broke out, and man, everyone was anti-Tesla and like, oh, they're not going to make it,
they still are,
everything. Oh, I'm sure they are. But I was the one I was like going on long monologues to correct the record and bring more context. And I was clearly like the black sheep in the group, in these groups. And I mean, these were top. I mean, I don't know what groups you're in. I don't know if it's the same groups, is what I'm saying.
They can't be that good if they're letting me in.
No, I just don't. I don't know if it's the same groups or different groups, but I mean, these were top people in the industry, and well, they stopped inviting me, I think, or I started ignoring them because I was like, I've had enough of this. I forget what it was, but yeah, I mean, we ended up being very right in our understanding. But it is interesting because what you said is all true, and I was concerned about that as well. Like with inventory growing, time on lot growing, I thought, oh no, is the US EV sales market dropping? And in Q2, it doesn't show that. But we'll get to the models specifically in a moment, which might help to understand that. But this is just the one where it breaks down. The top dark bar in each group is total BEV sales. The middle bar is Tesla sales, and the bottom bar is non-Tesla BEV sales. So you can see, yeah, Tesla continues to be about 62% of the BEV market in this year, and sort of held pretty steady. I thought it looked like it was closer to 50-50 this quarter, but more than like previous quarters. But yeah, it's still over 60%. But you can also see, if you just look at the bottom bar on each, you see the growth of the non-Tesla BEV market from 6,000 to 35,000 to 58,000 to 103,000. So that's strong growth outside of Tesla. Of course, Tesla is also growing fast, continues to grow fast, which, I'll be frank, I thought they'd be a little bit more like saturated at their price point with their just new tech and all that. I didn't expect to see so much growth in the US from Q2 last year to Q2 this year. And I continue to wonder about that, because I see them everywhere. I'm like, how much can this grow? There's a limit. There's a natural limit to how many people will buy from one brand,
Yeah.
new powertrain, when it's all over the place. Like, I don't know. And I mean, I know there's other markets like California and Florida are big markets, but outside of that, there's other markets where people are waiting to start getting their Teslas. But I don't know. What do you, I mean, can we see, I honestly do not believe next year, Q2, will see such strong growth.
I would be surprised if we did. I think we'll continue to see strong growth in the overall BEV market.
Yes.
What I don't think we'll see is that 60-40 split with the Model Y. And I say that only because other products that are direct competitors are coming online. You've got the Chevy Equinox and the Chevy Blazer EVs that'll be here next year. And those are mass market, 5-passenger family vehicles. And even if they are the same price or more expensive than a comparable Tesla, the general market, the Joe public right off the street, is going to assume that the Tesla is more expensive. They might think they can't afford a Tesla. They might be much more familiar with Chevrolet, go in there and buy that. And I think that's really interesting because, I've talked about this on other episodes of Clean Tech Talk. Perception lags reality. Yes. So let's look at that statement from the most basic thing, right? A thing happens out in space, 1,000,000 miles away, and it takes time for the light to reach your eyeballs. And by the time the light reaches your eyeballs, your brain has to process it and then perceive what happens. Something has to happen.
Dude, you're bringing a Carl Sagan like talk here. Carl Sagan TED Talk. What happened to Joe Friday? Holy moly! I'm impressed.
This is it's more of a Richard Feynman.
Oh my gosh! Now I'm even getting corrected. This is amazing, Joe. I'm really impressed.
I mean, okay. This is regardless. So this is more of a Feynman thing. But we're going to go
nervous. I'm making you nervous.
No, we're good. So something has to happen before we can perceive it, right? And I think Teslas came into the world as very expensive, high-end Mercedes S-Class type vehicles, and they registered in the public consciousness in that way. I'm not talking about car people. Car people are very different animals. I'm talking about general people who buy cars, because car people don't really necessarily buy cars except for Teslas. So you've got this group, and then the price of the Tesla, not only relative to the rest of the market, but relative to inflation, Teslas have become dramatically more affordable while the rest of the market has become more expensive. If you look at in some states with the incentives that are there, you can get a Tesla Model 3 for significantly less than a Toyota Corolla.
Well, that's sort of true because there are certain incentives, but also right now the Model 3 price is about what it was when I bought it 4 years ago. So it's gone up and then back down.
Sure.
So it's not really, it hasn't ever gone really low, except for the fact that you can get with incentives now again, because when I bought mine, it was the federal tax credit was cut in half to $3,750 from $7,500. With the Inflation Reduction Act, it's back up to $7,500. So you have basically the lowest price Tesla has sold, similar to when I bought mine, but you have more incentives, more subsidies.
But look at the rest of the market. That Toyota Corolla, that Ford,
Oh yes, no, I agree.
They have all gone up. So they're all going up. Tesla's going down. There's more incentives. It's become more affordable. And as they make things like the Highland, as they make more advances in the way they manufacture cars, and they're able to drive down costs, they're going to continue to have that kind of market advantage, right? So I do think that there's an upper limit. I'm not one of these people who believes that there is an infinite demand for Teslas, but I think
I'm shocked.
No, there's not. But I think that they are pulling the demand levers effectively.
Yeah.
And they will be able to steer this forward. And I think, interestingly, I don't think the general public cares about robotaxis.
Yeah. Well, there's three things that make me think it can't keep growing like it can. There's one thing that makes me think it can. So one thing is what Paul Foss has highlighted on our website very well, which is you can basically get a Tesla Model 3 for cheaper than a Toyota Corolla.
Yep.
And the difference in value and quality there is enormous. So if people start to figure this out, quality in terms of what you get, I mean, look, I'm beyond, I mean, it's a huge gulf between the Model 3 and the Corolla, huge in terms of drive quality, tech, everything. I mean, seats as well, in my opinion, are way far better. But if people start to figure that out, then I could see the sales growth continuing. But I'm not that confident in people figuring that out. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. The three things that make me concerned that it could not grow as fast would be, one, there's anecdotally, I see a lot more non-Tesla EVs popping up every day. So I think people are starting to realize there are non-Tesla EV options that are really good as well. And there's just choice. There's choice, whereas there wasn't much choice before. And those models increasingly will have access to supercharging. So make that 1 or 2 points there. But I think that basically there's going to be a lot more market for the non-Tesla BEVs than there was in the past. And secondly, I do think there's just like a natural limit with how many you can sell in this price point and this kind of class, this perceived class even. And it's already 8th in the overall auto market rankings. It could climb up a bit, but still, like, all the brands above it are selling very cheap cars at high volumes. I mean, you got Honda, Toyota, of course, non-cheap as well, but these are historically seen as budget new cars. And Tesla's not seen like that. People still think Teslas are expensive. And then the third case, I think a lot of people are waiting.
Before you go to the next thing, I want to make this point.
Okay, yeah.
I think part of Tesla's success is that they are seen as expensive offerings. I think once the public understands that they're affordable, they're going to sell fewer Teslas.
Oh, I don't know. I think they'll still be seen as high tech, premium. The drive quality is amazing. It's like almost incomparable. So I think that if people figure that out, they'll sell a lot more. But I do think that the third thing is people know there's supposed to be a more affordable Tesla coming. And there's the Cybertruck coming, but I'm not confident it will be mass produced at high volumes by Q2 of next year. So I think those two things combined, people are waiting for the more affordable Tesla, the Cybertruck, and I think that will quell demand a bit. I'm not really confident that the Highland is going to boost Model 3 sales a lot, because I don't think enough was improved or added. There were clear improvements, but I don't think it's got people jumping out of their seats to get one. And they've done some stuff that a lot of people don't like, which is removing the stalks, the gear stock and the wiper stock and stuff. And I just don't think a lot of people love that, even including Tesla owners. Like, I don't want that. I have the automatic wipers, which after the last software update, they constantly update when I'm backing into my garage. I mean, they constantly turn on when I'm backing into my garage. And then when I have auto on in the rain, they're not doing it enough. So I'm like, I don't want a freaking button to have to, I want to keep my stock where I can easily, I mean, I don't know. In any case,
where you can just give it a little flick and the thing goes, and it's just
a step too far, in my opinion, for a lot of people. And so I don't think people are going to be jumping out of their seats to get the Highland Model 3 like they are in other models. But let's move on to so this is the overall. I'm gonna have to zoom in here, I guess.
It's the Model Y and then everything else.
Yeah, the Model Y, the bar is off the chart. The Model 3, which is about, this is an estimate again, so it could be a bit different, the ratio, but
it won't be that different.
But no, Troy tracks the factories, the ships, everything quite well.
Production and to be clear, we're talking about the estimate is 104. It might be 102.50.
Yeah,
it might be 106, but it's not going to be 80. And even if it is 80, it's still more than the next 5 EVs combined.
It might be like 100 to 60 or 100 to 70, but still, anyway, it's the Model Y and its little brother, the Model 3, for people who want a sportier drive, don't care about space as much. And then you've got, like, the way I like to look at this obviously you see Tesla leads, and then I like to look at the rest of the chart sort of separate and sort of see like how do these players jostle for position. So the Bolt EV EUV, which was supposed to be discontinued but sort of coming back, it's still leading the market. Otherwise, Rivian is doing quite well. I was surprised how many they've sold, although I see them popping up around me, so I'm not that surprised. The Mustang Mach-E had a bounce back, is doing quite well. The Ioniq 5, Joe's car, and the one that I would, if I was on the market for a new car right now, I would probably be between the Ioniq 5 and the Model Y. Maybe the EV6 as well, Kia EV6. Then you've got
EV6 is a hot car.
I know, but basically you have a lot of mid-table. I mean, these are not high sales. I mean, if you quadruple this, you know, for an annual estimate, the Bolt is getting up close to 60,000. The Rivian above 50,000.
I think the Rivian is low. The Lightning was affected by some recalls, which kept their numbers artificially low. But I mean, I'll tell you, I'm surprised at the Ioniq 6. I bet that is, I think that's probably inventory limited. But the Rivian does not surprise me because pickup trucks in the US traditionally occupy the top slots. So if you look at like the 10 best-selling vehicles in the US, year after year after year, number one is Ford F-Series pickups. Number two is Chevy Silverado. Pickups are like a huge, and they're hundreds of thousands, way more than anything that you could call a car. So I'm not surprised by that at all. I think next year, the one that's going to be really interesting is going to be the Silverado. That's a little bit of a different kind of truck than the F-150 Lightning is, and the Rivian.
Do you think that will boost F-150 Lightning sales too? Like sort of like the overall market will be like, oh, different brands have electric trucks. Maybe it's time to get one.
Yeah, I think you're going to see there is still brand loyalty among Ford and Chevy. There is still that, like, I'm a Chevy guy, I'm a Ford guy. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, especially fleets, commercial fleets, that have been holding off on buying a Lightning because they want to see what the Silverado's got.
Oh, that's a good point.
When the Silverado does show up and it has a unit body and it's a lot more like an old Avalanche than a modern Silverado, they're not going to be able to put, they're not going to be able to upfit it with their custom beds. They're not going to be able to put, their toolboxes on the back of it the way that they can with a Lightning. They're not going to be able to do a lot of traditional upfitting. You're going to see Chevy dealers try to keep their commercial customers and kind of direct them possibly towards a more commercial style or diesel. Maybe the new GMC 2500 gas motor is really nice. They're going to go that way because the new Silverado is just not a work truck in the way that the Lightning is. Jennifer Sensible actually did a really good article about this when the Silverado was first shown. It's going to have some unique advantages from a consumer space, from the people that use these things as large sedans and basically shuttle back and forth to work in a pickup truck. Because of some kind of warped sense of masculinity or something. But those guys are going to have no problem with the Silverado. But people who are actually using these things for work, they might be waiting for the Silverado. They're going to be disappointed when it gets here. That might sell a lot more Lightnings. It might sell a lot more Duramax, diesel powered Chevys. Who knows?
Well, what I thought you were going to say when you started saying that was then they can just decide. So a lot of people might be waiting for it to arrive just to compare them and decide. And so there might be a boost in demand for both. I mean, for obviously the new one, but also the Lightning, when finally they look at them and decide, okay, now that I've seen them both, I want the Lightning. Or someone else, now that I've seen them both, I want the Silverado. But there might be a lot of buyers who are just like, well, let me first see the Silverado EV and then decide if I want, if I still want the Lightning. I think the
Silverado, I think we should talk about
or the Rivian, which, I mean, honestly, I'm impressed with how well it's done.
I'm surprised by how well it's done. I'm not impressed.
Okay. It needs to sell a lot more, but
it needs to sell a lot more.
I always just thought from the beginning, I thought it looked like a truck for software engineers in Seattle. Like that's how I sort of looked at the design. In real life, I'm like, oh, that's a real truck. it's just the headlights to me. They look very hipster, very like
It is.
east, very coastal kind of. But in any case, whether I don't know who's buying them, but I'm seeing more and more of them, and I think there are a lot of probably those kind of people who buy trucks anyway, and they're intrigued by it, or maybe it's not as hipster looking as I think it is, and truck people like it too. It's definitely got a lot of great features, like the gear tunnel that goes across behind the seats, under the seats.
Yeah. I know two people that have a Rivian. One of them is a middle school teacher who cannot afford it.
What?
No, dude. No.
What?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. It's like an $80,000 truck. The wife is enraged that he bought this thing. It's like the payment is like half. It's like almost as much as their mortgage, and she is just absolutely enraged that he has it. And he has like convinced himself that he'll be able to drive it for a year and then flip it for more than he paid for it.
Oh, that stings.
That's not what's going to happen.
No.
But for the next couple of months, he's still going to drive around and pretend he's a rich guy. So that's guy number one. The second person I know that has a Rivian has been through like 6 different EVs. Like they buy a new EV every 6 months, and they're like really into EVs and like what's new and what's great and what's awesome. And the way the used car market has been going, that hasn't cost them a ton of money, but I suspect the Rivian will, but we'll see. I still think, but I want to get back to this point about the Silverado and the F-150. GM's Ultium platform works really well on commercial vans, and like we've seen with the GM Bright Drop that we talked about yesterday. It really serves that purpose well, but it is not the same kind of traditional body on frame architecture that the Silverado has traditionally occupied. And this is important because there's a lot of companies that upfit the trucks that they buy with work bodies, with tow bodies, with, cherry picker bodies and things like that are designed to go onto that frame, onto those dual frame rails. And by switching to this Ultium architecture and using the name Silverado, they've created in the public this idea that this is going to be the same type of thing, just electric. It's not. It's a totally different vehicle, in the same way that a Mustang Mach-E is totally different from the conventional Mustang. The difference is nobody's livelihood depends on whether or not their tool bed is going to fit on their pickup truck. I don't think that this is going to be a big commercial success for Chevrolet for those reasons. And I think it is going to drive those companies and those fleets that have decided that they must go electric. It's going to drive them to the F-150 Lightning. And there's plenty of reasons for that. But I think the most simple, obvious one is it's not built the same way that these trucks have been built for 50 years. And there's a whole sub-industry built around supporting the way that trucks have been built for 50 years. And where the Lightning is really, really smart is that if you have an F-150, a crew cab pickup, and you've got some kind of tool body on it, it'll fit on the Lightning.
Yeah, it was a really interesting discussion you had. And as you said, Jennifer Sensiba has covered that really well. And just good to see you and Jennifer on the same page on a topic too, because that's not always the case. But
Jennifer and I almost always agree on the topic, and she and I almost always have the same opinions, but
slight differences which make you
livid, just absolutely livid.
There's
how
it is.
Great joke from Emo Phillips about like these two people meet and they're like, "Oh, I'm from Georgia. I'm from Georgia too. What part? Oh, I'm from a little town outside of Atlanta called Altoona. Oh, me too. Yeah, I have a house right on the lake. Well, I have a house right on the lake. Oh, that's amazing. I go to the Baptist church. I go to the Baptist church. Oh, that's incredible. I go to the 28th denomination. I go to the 29th denomination." The guy goes, "Die, heretic."
Exactly.
And like, that's me and Jennifer to a T, dude. They'll be like,
I mean, neighbors and family members have the biggest fights, and neighbors have the biggest rivalries, the
100%,
the worst blood. It's the case with countries, with
and she's like, "Oh, I had a Fiero in high school, and it was the best car ever." And I'm like, "I had a Fiero in high school, and it was terrible." Like,
it's funny from the outside. You're like, you guys are so similar. Like, not you and Jen, but just in general, anyone's like, you're so similar, and you fight about everything. But One
Yeah.
more thing I want to highlight in this chart is Audi sort of hurts its like its superficial look on this chart because it breaks out its models by so many different in so many different ways, and the model sales. So the opposite of Tesla, basically, it's got, you know, the Q4 Sportback e-tron, the Q4 e-tron, the, you know, they have like, they have so many different e-tron. Let's see the Q4 e-tron up there. Then you get the, yeah, these different, the GTs. So they actually are doing quite well, but because they split their sales data out so much, they're just all at the bottom mostly. And then
But
Mercedes
that
is a
goes
bit
to
similar.
show, that goes to show who is being served, because a Tesla's reporting exists to serve the shareholders and pump the stock. Audi's reporting exists to, yeah, report and give intel, but you do not want to be buying an Audi Q8 and feeling like you're buying a commodity. You want to feel like you're buying something special. So they're
Yeah,
going
but
to
even
do
the
everything
Q8,
they can.
they've got the Q8
Sure.
e-tron, the Q8 e-tron Sportback, the Q. I don't know if they have the GT for that yet, but I mean they will if they
They
don't.
will. But if
And
I'm
then
selling you
Mercedes,
one of these, if I'm selling you one of these on the floor and I go, listen, man, I know you're probably comparing this to a Tesla Model X or whatever. There's 7,000 of those sold in the last quarter. You probably have 2 or 3 of them in your neighborhood. Audi's only sold 600 of these. So you're
yeah,
going to have the only one. And that matters to their demographic. That's
but
why
you
they
also,
do it.
I mean, just looking at like the sport models, like Tesla could break out the performance models separately, and they would have a separate chart bar, but they don't, and the long range, etc. And also Mercedes does this with the, for example, the EQE SUV and the EQE sedan, and it's also the EQS SUV, the EQS sedan. That's basically like if Tesla broke out the Model Y and Model 3, but we at least estimate that breakout. But let's move on. So we'll do these a little quicker, but this is just change year over year in Q2 by model. So you can see Model Y has grown enormously. A bunch of other models have grown a bit. The Model 3 has been sort of, I mean, it's grown a second, but it's not enormous like the Model Y. And a bunch have grown. Down at the bottom, the only models really that haven't grown are older models, or like in the case of
You look at the Mach-E, you look at the Hummer, you look at the Taycan.
Yeah,
These are more established models that are
the e-tron growing competition internally. They have several more e-tron options.
Yeah, I think the most interesting one there is the Kia EV6, because Kia, I believe, lost its $7,500 credit.
Oh, that's what happened.
Yeah,
you see, I love that vehicle, and I was like, why is it down there? Like, what's wrong? I forgot that it's
because you don't get the 7,500 anymore. So someone walking in there
5 points
is
for
now,
Joe.
yeah, is now, see, you know, it's almost as if I do this for a living. Big brain cavity.
So if you go back 2 years, this is even more dramatic, where everything is up. The Model Y enormously, the Model 3 a lot. Rivian, of course, is growing from like nothing. And the ICEV 5 is from like nothing.
I have yet to see an Ariya on the road.
I've seen one. I saw it. I was like, oh wow, it's an Ariya or Ariya. I don't know.
Whatever.
But I saw one or two.
Wait.
But I remember seeing, and I was like, oh, is that the first Ariya I've seen? I thought. So down at the bottom here, 2 years a comparison. The i3, which is now not sold, it's done. There's just a couple of e-trons, which again have internal competition. The Taycan, which is a bit old and has growing competition,
and again, it also lost its rebate.
Oh, Joe, you got,
because it's over $80,000, so it lost its rebate.
Yes. This is percentage change for the same thing.
Yeah. Why are people? Serious question. I don't have anything personally against the Leaf, but I do have something against the CHAdeMO charging system. Why is anyone buying Leafs in 2023?
Exactly what I was asking myself when I was doing this. I was like it was a fine leader in the industry. Like, is it just people who had a Leaf and they want another Leaf? But I asked the exact same questions. Like, why are people buying a Leaf right now? Like, you can get an ICEV 5, you can get a Bolt, you can get all different options. I I can only think that it's repeat buyers who were happy with their previous Leaf, so they got another one. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, why?
I don't know. I think to me, this is sort of like plug share, where like people just they have heard the word Nissan Leaf enough times that they feel
Maybe.
comfortable with it. So they're just like, oh, I got a Nissan Leaf. It'll be great.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I want to be clear, not a bad car, not a bad
No,
product.
it's not. And I like the Leaf. It's
I will
just that there are better
never.
options.
There are better options, and like just don't.
I don't know.
Just don't buy it.
It's surprising, especially as you said with the fast charging. I mean, it's very limited.
And it's not even that cheap. Like it's comparable to the Chevy Bolt. It's comparable to the low end Model 3s. It's certainly comparable to like a used Model 3. I don't get it.
The range is not great. The charging is not great. It's like
the charging is terrible. The charging is, it's 2023 and the charging is about what you would have expected in 2015, 2016.
I mean, basically, since Nissan pushed out Carlos Ghosn, they've done almost nothing on EVs.
Yeah,
so it's like
that's right.
And I mean, he got arrested and then had to escape Japan, all that. But anyway,
they shipped him out of the country in luggage.
Not a normal CEO push out.
No,
yeah, he escaped inside of luggage.
What happened to the first CEO at Volkswagen?
I don't know. The EV revolution in 5 charts. We have another fun chart article. This one's from RMI. I'm just going to jump straight to the. Well, we can do the headlines first. EV sales growing exponentially. S curves, as we've talked about before. Forecasters keep underestimating the speed of EV growth. We've mentioned that as well. This is sort of just a roundup of news that was coming out. The drivers of change are getting stronger. When are EVs cheaper to buy than ICE vehicles? And it's different in different markets. Exponential growth will continue. The growth of EVs push the ICE fleet and oil demand for cars into terminal decline. Let's just look chart by chart real quick. Yeah, we've been doing these charts for years too. The EV sales have followed the S curve in market after market. In fact, in markets where they passed 2 or 3% more recently, the curve has been steeper. For example, Norway was the clear leader, and it's got the least steep S curve there because it was just ahead of everything with limited options, I would say. But other more recent markets, barring some issues with subsidy changes and whatnot, have seen very steep rises. The forecasts have been dramatically wrong from the IEA, International Energy Agency, and others. Bloomberg New Energy Finance has also consistently been pessimistic, and others. The most wild, crazy forecasters, and I will say I know from speaking to people inside this industry, forecasting industry, that the more conventional ones have to undercut expectations for various reasons due to having to look serious, who their clients are. And it's the more wild, we're going to see dramatic S-curve growth ones who look crazy, but are actually the more accurate ones, and everybody knows it. So that's been the case, and this just shows it again. So, yep. This is an interesting one about when EVs are cheaper than comparable gas and diesel cars, different sizes, SUV for SUV, large, medium, small. Cars in Europe, China.
So this is interesting. So we're looking at 2026, supposedly in the US.
For SUVs, which is basically everything.
It's basically everything, right? Exactly. So what are we calling L, M, and N? Those are large, small, and medium cars, I guess?
I guess so.
Because I don't see pickups on there, and I think that would be the number one.
I would assume pickups are lumped in with SUVs, or they just sort of excluded from this. I don't know.
Well, it's funny you say that because legislation often changes very slowly in the United States. And we have a scenario where, and I don't know if you even realize this. Are you familiar with corporate average fuel efficiency standards, CAFE standards?
Yeah.
So CAFE standards primarily, or in some ways, affect cars differently than trucks, right?
Yeah.
So the reason that you're seeing the proliferation,
big horrible loopholes.
Big horrible loopholes. So to have a truck in the United States is that the rear opening has to be X% of the rear of the vehicle, and you have to have a flat load floor. So if your seats fold flat in your hatchback, like a Chrysler PT Cruiser was considered a truck because the seats folded flat, a Volvo XC40 is a truck because the seats fold flat and the rear opens up like a hatch. So all of these things are part of the reason that SUVs and crossovers are proliferating in the United States, because they can be legislated, they can be registered as trucks. They have different safety regulations, different fuel economy standards, even different emission standards. So that is part of the reason behind all this, and part of what's driving this, right? Is there's a concerted marketing effort to get you to buy SUVs. There's a higher profit margin because
light
less
duty
stuff is there.
trucks.
Exactly. So that's actually really critical to understanding this chart, because if we're talking about small, medium, and large sedans, which represent a continuously smaller and narrowing slice of the overall pie, and we're considering SUVs and trucks and crossovers and everything to fall under that SUV, then that 2026 number is really, really awesome.
Yeah, I had to sit back because that issue makes my blood boil, and then it just deflates me because
when this is over, you can go play some pickleball and you'll feel better.
I'm not. Now you make my blood boil more. I hate pickleball. We're gonna get to your pickleball sponsorship at the end, Joe.
Voodoo Rangers. Sorry,
I support you, but you're one of the only people I support playing pickleball because you're a good friend.
You shouldn't. I'm literally just in it for the free beer.
But I'm happy to hear
just in it for the free beer.
But this is a really interesting chart, yeah. And so you see large sedans, I assume is what they're referring to, and SUVs in the US 2026, in China, and I mean in Europe it's 2025. China, funny enough, it's got the small cars are more competitive sooner in 2025. I'm surprised it's not already the case, but I guess they're not quite at 50%. I don't know, but anyway, just focusing on the US and Europe. Europe then gets with small and medium cars 2026, and the US medium in 2028, small in 2029, although nobody buys small cars in the US, so it doesn't matter. So it's really I mean, yeah, well, anyway, and of course this can change, but this is I think a fascinating look at this topic, and I'm happy SUVs are ahead because that's what automakers are selling, that's what people buy. So the sooner those are competitive and large sedans, the better. But that's 3 years or 2.5 years from now. That's sticker price, so that's not looking at cost of operation or subsidies. So I think we could speed that up a bit if you want to look at those. But yeah, let's move on. It's just really interesting chart. We'll see how much it holds.
We'll see how that plays out.
And you see that is referencing Bloomberg New Energy Finance BNEF data, which, as I've said, has historically been a little pessimistic. This is just global EV and ICE market share forecast changes. As one goes up, the other goes down. And that
is my understanding of how numbers work. Yes.
You can see on the I guess one thing to highlight here, on the faster adoption curve, you're at almost 90% in 2030.
Yeah. And I think that
aligns with CleanTechnica readers.
No, I think that's probably right. Where you're going to see holdouts is you're going to see holdouts in, I don't want to say rural areas because that's not what I mean. I mean areas that are remote. You're going to see holdouts in Alaska. You're going to see holdouts in Wyoming and North Dakota, places where people are used to carrying their own jerry can of fuel because access to fuel is not even reliable. And it's going to be hard for them to come to trust, just to come to trust something else. Right.
Yeah. And Norway's at that level and has been sort of hovering around 90% because there's certain vehicle segments where you don't get electric yet.
I don't know.
Areas.
I feel like the goal is to burn zero fossil fuels, right? But I think this is one of those cases where you can't let perfection be the enemy of the good.
No.
If we can get to 85, 90% reduction in fossil fuel burning, and we can get that 10 to 12% left into a hybrid, into a PHEV, into something that burns a little bit cleaner, something bioethanol, biodiesel, I think we would have made a significant impact in overall carbon emissions. And I think that's the goal, right? Like, we're not doing this because we love batteries. We're doing this really because we want to live on Earth.
Yeah, and I do think that that kind of 61 to 89% is sort of pretty closely matches what a lot of CleanTechnica readers, the ranges that a lot of CleanTechnica readers would give, because we have variation there. I don't think many assume less than that. And of course, that means dropping oil demand, which is going to change a lot in the world, but we'll leave it at that today. We won't talk oil. Let's move to another story that doesn't have charts.
Thank Jeebus. So this is a great story. Electric Autonomy is a really good site. They cover EVs with a specific market, that market being Canada. So they really focus on some of the municipalities and some of the government fleets that Canada is doing. Obviously, hydropower in Quebec and things like that have been energy leaders, renewable leaders for 100+ years. And Electric Autonomy has been covering that, very well for the last several years. So this is an interesting move. The city of Toronto, which of course is one of Canada's major cities, it's like a number 4 city in the US kind of thing. It's like a baby New York if you've ever been there. It's very nice. Toronto is proposing to require all vehicles for hire to be zero emissions by 2031. And this is actually a really interesting thing, because this is delivery vehicles, this is taxis, this is limos, this is livery, this is commercial trucks, that kind of thing. So effectively pushing them to ZEV, I think, is going to be huge, because the commercial market, the rental market, the hire market does put a lot of vehicles into the used car market, just like they do in the US. Enterprise does this, Avis does this. When they're done with their vehicles, they have a couple thousand miles on them, they churn them into the auctions, and they go out and they're available for sale through car dealerships. So this is kind of the same thing. So this is just going to accelerate the secondary market for EVs among private passenger vehicles. So I'm really excited about this.
The thing that annoys me about these kind of things is, as we just saw, the forecast is these are going to be electric anyway. But it's like, oh, we're making a big commitment to basically follow the normal adoption curve. But on the other hand, it gives a signal. It's what makes the market get there quicker. So I do like it. I think I love these. It's just, I'm all the cynical, like, little part of my brain is like, of course we'll already be there. What is this? Like, you want to do something aggressive, make it 2027, but
yeah.
But no, I think it's great. And it's funny to me too, because Kara Clareman of Plug and Drive here, we both presented at a Renewable Cities conference in Vancouver. I think, was it 10? No, I think it was 8 years ago. 8 years ago in Vancouver. So it's funny to see, we're still both doing the same thing, and just how much has changed in 8 years, though, because that's where I first gave the presentation, The Future Is Now, and highlighted that our technology of the future is here now, and we can use it now, and just become more and more true. But yeah, anything else to say on this?
I do want to point out that Canada is still one of those places that's a little bit weird, where, as progressive as Canada has been on a lot of issues that in the United States would be considered, ultra liberal, super progressive things, Canada is still very rural, and they do still have a similar mindset to rural America, which is to say that they drive their pickup trucks, they like their internal combustion, they understand that. So yeah, I think we're going to be there, but I think this is one of those where the US is actually a little bit ahead of Canada. So I think 2031 will be a good step for Toronto.
Haven't Lyft and Uber said 2030?
Yeah.
US. But anyway, yeah. Well, they also have a very strong and powerful oil industry in part of the country. Vancouver is the really progressive, of course, like the same West Coast. And Vancouver is great for EVs anyway, because like 99% of their electricity comes from renewables, a lot of hydro.
And there's just not that far to drive.
So like all of their emissions are almost from cars. So it's like the more you electrify, the better. And that was something Kara Claremont pointed out at that conference 8 years ago, and still remember.
Yay.
So
So
this is a
this
funny
is,
story.
yeah,
For a
this
few
is
reasons.
interesting. It's well timed for reasons. I would say that, so Zach and I go back and forth on this hydrogen thing a lot. Um, I, I was indoctrinated into the world of hydrogen by the movie Who Killed the Electric Car, and little Chelsea Sexton and being blonde and cute on TV and telling me that hydrogen was bad, and I just believed it, right? But despite that, there seems to be a ton of hydrogen news. And in Europe, the EU, the alternative, whatever it is, alternative fuels infrastructure regulations, they have now effectively mandated every 200 kilometers from the city center, there's going to be hydrogen filling stations. They're going to be available for buses, commercial trucks, what we would call class 8s or semis here in the States. And I think those are markets where hydrogen can make sense, but they're also making it available for passenger cars. And I'm just not sold on the idea of a hydrogen passenger car.
Yeah, the funny thing is this is such a long and complicated topic. We have like a handful of hour-long podcasts about this alone.
We do.
From different people. And so I want to unpack a few things. One is the oil and gas industry has heavily pushed hydrogen for over a decade because that allows them to keep doing what they do, because the vast majority of hydrogen comes from natural gas reformation. And all the talk of green hydrogen is great, splitting water to create hydrogen using renewable electricity, but it's not close to cost competitive with natural gas reformation. So as long as they push hydrogen and talk about green hydrogen being the solution, when it comes down to it, any hydrogen, a lot of hydrogen is going to come from natural gas for the foreseeable future. So it's a sneaky way for the oil and gas industry to push hydrogen. On the other side, there are applications where green hydrogen is the best solution in the long term, whether that's for fertilizers, for some storage, potentially for some large vehicles. This is debatable, of course, but for some large like aircraft, although that's like, remember the Hindenburg? But so trains, large trucks, it's very debatable whether that is really the best long-term application, but it's at least debatable. It's at least a discussion, and a lot of people believe it is. So it's got potential there. It's been trialed in buses for over a decade. I remember in 2013, I was in Barcelona, EVS 27, and the director of the Barcelona Transit Agency was like, oh, we did hydrogen bus trials, and now we're doing a BYD electric bus trial, and it's like 10 times cheaper and like reliable. So even 10 years ago, it was like battery electric buses crushed them. And there's still pilots because there's like people get influenced by the hydrogen hype, and policymakers push it and force it and make it happen. So some of these bus trials recently have just been like, we're done. Sorry, we're not doing hydrogen. Forget that. Everything we said, we're going to battery electric. So I think there's been a clear shift in the market. Like, okay, yeah, hydrogen's bullshit. Sorry. And we're not doing that. Even in this article that talks about this new requirement, they talk about Danish hydrogen supplier Everfuel recently closed 3 and paused until further notice 2 of its refueling stations in Denmark. This is something about compliance, but I mean, frankly, it's just not competitive. It might be for large trucks. Maybe Europe is doing something useful here by forcing it, but it's, a free market American would be like, oh, it's again Europe forcing, mandating inefficient, bad solutions. Like that's the other take you can have. And for sure, I don't see it as viable for small vehicles. It's just, I've seen plenty of comparisons and research on that. It's just like highly inefficient. There's no way it ever competes with battery electric in small vehicles. It might in large, heavy vehicles.
There's 2 things that make it viable for large, heavy vehicles. The number one is that the fuel cell vehicle, the hydrogen combustion vehicles, they don't have the weight penalty that you get from batteries. And this is a real problem. We talk about this at ACT all the time.
Yeah.
Is that if you're carrying 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of batteries, that's 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of payload that you're no longer allowed to have because they're maxed out at 80,000 pounds. There's new legislation to max out semis at 82,000 pounds to help offset that battery weight. but the mass difference is way more than 2,000 pounds. So you're losing payload, you're losing income, you're losing the ability to legally move products. So that's one of the places where it really does offset, especially when you're talking about over the lifetime of a vehicle, 500, 600,000 miles of driving, 1,000,000 kilometers of driving. You separate that into loads, you take tons and tons and tons of payloads out of it. Now, all of a sudden, it becomes less commercially viable. So that's number one. The second thing is, it's not just the oil companies, it's not just the oil and gas providers that are pushing for hydrogen. The automotive suppliers are as well. If you look at Bosch or Delco and you go to their displays and you understand what you're looking at, I have some really good pictures of this. Actually, I'll send them to you. We can do another show about it. The housings for the compressor housings on a fuel cell that pump oxygen through, they are the same turbo housings that are being used on the performance cars. If you see the radiators and some of the materials that are being used within the exchange stacks, this is all stuff that already exists. There's, steering pumps that are also starters, that are also solenoids. So they're repurposing a lot of their existing products that have come from 50 years of automotive development that are very familiar to people who are in that automotive world, whether they're air, the air ride suspensions or the ECMs or any of that. The Bosch ME97, which is a really good ECU with 128-bit encryption that took me about an hour and a half to crack. They're still using that on the Nikola hydrogen truck. So a lot of these
which
things
still exists.
So what I'm saying is that
I think
there's a whole industry that a lot of these governments are looking at, and we're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees that are facing an existential threat of transitioning to battery electric, and they're all pushing for this hydrogen thing to go. So while I don't think it's the same as BEV, I don't think it should be put in that light. I do understand that there's a lot more pressures on these politicians than just oil and gas money. There's a whole industry that they want to keep going here.
That's a good point. I mean, it's more
doesn't make it right. It just means there's a lot more.
No, there's a lot of people who don't want to see their companies and jobs go under. Yeah, this is something you just shared with me while we're talking. So analysis shows that it's now 14 times more expensive to drive a Toyota hydrogen car, Toyota Mirai, in California than a comparable Tesla.
Look at the price. Look at the price at the pump. It was $175 to fill up that car.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many ridiculous stories about trying to use these stations and trying to live with a hydrogen car. It's hilarious, but tragic. Well, that's it. That's our show. But we've got one more thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to click this. Oh, I thought this was the site. Well,
we can't announce this yet. It's not official.
Oh, okay.
Not official.
So
however, this is a teaser. So live rangerously. Enjoy that teaser.
Yeah. Well, we'll just say, as you know, as you may have gathered, I'm a tennis nut, and Joe is a racing nut, but he's also become quite adept at pickleball, which is the nemesis, the arch enemy of tennis. But in any case, this might be.
You might see me in a Voodoo Ranger themed, spandex onelet.
He might be so good that he's sporting this gold glasses and ranger hat on the
pickleball courts.
We'll see.
Look for us in Chicago, baby.
That's our show. Thank you very much. Peace out.
Oh my God. I can't believe we're still recording.